The stars looked different through the viewport of the horizon's edge. Jake Morrison wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the vast darkness outside. He had been working on the coolant system for 3 hours now, and his back was starting to hurt. The ship was old and things broke down all the time. That was why they needed him on board. He was good at fixing things. Jake was 32 years old, average height with brown hair that was always a bit messy. He came from Colorado, where he had worked in factories and workshops before joining the space program. He was not a scientist like the other crew members. He was not a pilot or a captain. He was just an engineer who made sure everything kept running. It was a simple job and he liked it that way. The Horizon's Edge was a science vessel with 12 people on board. They had spent 6 months studying rocks and plants on a distant planet. Now they were heading home to Earth. Everyone was tired and ready to see their families again. Jake was looking forward to sleeping in his own bed and eating food that did not come from a package. He crawled out from under the coolant system and stretched. The job was almost done. Just a few more connections to check, and then he could take a break. Maybe get some coffee. Even though the ship's coffee was terrible, he often joked that the coffee machine was the one thing on the ship he could not fix. That was when the alarm started blaring. Jake jumped and hit his head on a pipe. He cursed and rubbed the sore spot as red lights flashed throughout the corridor. The alarm meant only one thing. Another ship was approaching, and it was not friendly. His heart started beating faster. In 2 years of working on science vessels, he had never heard this alarm before. He ran toward the bridge, his boots clanging on the metal floor. Other crew members were rushing in the same direction, their faces pale with fear. When he reached the bridge, Captain Lisa Martin was standing in front of the main screen, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. On the screen was a ship, but it was not like any human ship Jake had ever seen. It was massive, at least 10 times the size of the Horizon's Edge. Its hull was dark purple and covered in sharp angles that looked like weapons. Lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. "What is that?" someone whispered. "Unknown vessel," the captain said, her voice tight. "They are not responding to our communications, and they are blocking our path." Jake felt his stomach drop. Everyone in the galaxy had heard rumors about hostile aliens. Some species did not want to share space with humans. Some thought humans were too dangerous. Others just wanted to conquer everything they found. Looking at that massive ship, Jake knew they were in serious trouble. The alien ship moved closer. It was slow and deliberate, like a predator circling its prey. The captain ordered evasive maneuvers, but the Horizon's Edge was a science vessel, not a warship. It was slow and had no weapons. They could not fight and they could not run. A beam of purple light shot out from the alien ship and hit the Horizon's Edge. The entire vessel shook violently. Jake grabbed onto a railing to keep from falling. Sparks flew from control panels and the lights flickered. The ship's engines made a grinding noise and then went silent. "They have disabled our engines," the pilot said, panic creeping into his voice. "We are dead in space." The captain tried the communications again. "This is Captain Lisa Martin of the Earth vessel Horizon's Edge. We are a peaceful science ship. We mean no harm. Please respond." There was only silence. Then a new sound filled the bridge. It was a voice, deep and harsh, speaking through the communication system. The words were not English, but the computer translated them in real time. "Human vessel. You will not resist. You will be boarded. Any resistance will result in termination." The crew looked at each other with wide eyes. No one knew what to do. They were scientists and engineers, not soldiers. They had no weapons and no training for this kind of situation. 30 minutes later, the aliens came aboard. Jake watched from the corridor as metal beings cut through the airlock doors. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with bodies that looked like they were made of dark armor. Their faces were hidden behind helmets that had glowing red visors. They moved with military precision, their weapons raised and ready. The crew was gathered in the main cargo bay. The aliens forced them to kneel on the floor with their hands behind their heads. Jake knelt between Danny Fletcher, the ship's cook, and Lisa, the captain. His heart was pounding so hard he thought everyone could hear it. One of the aliens walked into the bay. This one was different from the others. Taller, with more elaborate armor that had gold markings on it. This was clearly their leader. The alien removed its helmet, and Jake got his first real look at an alien face. It was reptilian with dark green skin that had purple patterns running across it. The eyes were yellow with vertical slits like a snake. The mouth was full of sharp teeth. Two horns curved back from its head. It was terrifying. The alien leader walked slowly along the line of kneeling humans, studying each one carefully. Its yellow eyes moved from face to face, judging, evaluating. When it reached the captain, it stopped. "I am General Jatik of the Velkran Empire," the alien said through a translation device on its armor. "Your species has entered space that belongs to us. You are weak. You are primitive. You will tell us about your world's defenses or you will die." The captain lifted her chin defiantly. "We are explorers, not soldiers. We know nothing about military matters. We are protected by interstellar law." General Jatik made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your laws mean nothing here. The Velkran Empire has conquered 47 worlds. You will be the 48th, he continued, walking down the line. He stopped in front of the chief scientist, then the pilot, then the navigator. Each time he seemed dissatisfied. He was looking for something specific, but Jake could not figure out what. Then the general stopped in front of Jake. Their eyes met. Those yellow snake eyes stared into Jake's face for a long moment. Jake tried not to look away, even though every instinct told him to. He could smell the alien, a strange mix of metal and something chemical. "This one," General Jatik said, pointing at Jake. "He will come with me." "What? Why him?" the captain demanded. "He is just an engineer. He does not know anything." "Exactly," the general said. "Officers lie. Officers are trained to resist. But common workers, they know the practical truth. They know how things really work." Two Velkran soldiers grabbed Jake by the arms and hauled him to his feet. He tried to pull away, but their grip was like iron. "Wait," Jake said. "I really don't know anything important. I just fix things. I am not special. You will come with me to my flagship," the general said. "You will answer my questions. If you cooperate, your crew will be placed in stasis and left unharmed. If you resist, I will execute them one by one while you watch." Jake looked back at his crewmates. Lisa was shaking her head, telling him not to do it. But what choice did he have? If he refused, they would all die. "Okay," Jake said quietly. "I will go with you. Just do not hurt them." General Jatik smiled, showing all his sharp teeth. "Wise choice, human. You are learning your place already." The soldiers dragged Jake toward the airlock. He took one last look at the horizon's edge, at his crewmates, at the life he had known. He had no idea if he would ever see any of it again. As they pulled him into the alien ship, one thought kept running through his mind. He was in serious trouble. The Velkran flagship was enormous. Jake was dragged through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Everything was dark purple and black with lights that pulsed in strange rhythms. The air smelled wrong, like burning plastic mixed with something sweet and rotten. It made his stomach turn. The soldiers holding him did not speak. They just pulled him along like he weighed nothing. Jake tried to memorize the route they were taking, counting turns and noting landmarks. It was an old habit from his days working in large factories. Always know where the exits are. Always know how to get back. They threw him into a cell. Jake hit the floor hard and rolled. Before he could get up, a force field hummed to life across the doorway, trapping him inside. The soldiers left without a word. Jake slowly got to his feet and looked around his new prison. The cell was about 12 feet by 12 feet. 3 walls were solid metal. The 4th wall was the force field, which shimmered with purple energy. Through it he could see a corridor and other cells across from his. They appeared empty. There was a metal bench built into one wall. No blankets, no pillow, nothing soft. The temperature was cold, maybe 60 degrees. Jake hugged himself and sat down on the bench. His mind was racing. How was he going to get out of this? What did the general want from him? And more importantly, would he really leave the crew alone? Hours passed. Jake had no watch, and there were no windows to show day or night. He paced the cell, then sat, then paced again. He examined every inch of the walls, looking for weaknesses or control panels. There was nothing. The cell was designed to be escape-proof. Finally, the force field dropped. General Jatik entered the cell, ducking slightly to fit through the doorway. Up close, he was even more intimidating. His armor made soft clicking sounds as he moved. Those yellow eyes stared at Jake with cold intelligence. "Human," the general said. "We will now talk. You will answer my questions truthfully or you will suffer." Jake stood up, trying to look braver than he felt. "I told you I do not know anything important. I fix broken equipment. That is all. We will see." The general pulled up a holographic display from a device on his wrist. Images appeared in the air between them. Tell me about Earth's military fleet. How many warships? Where are they stationed? I have no idea, Jake said honestly. I work on science vessels. I've never even been near a military ship. The general's eyes narrowed. You are lying. I am not lying. Look, I am just a regular guy. Before I joined the space program, I worked in a factory fixing assembly robots. I know about coolant systems and power relays and hull maintenance. I do not know anything about the military. Jothic studied him for a long moment. Then he changed tactics. Tell me about Earth's defenses. Orbital stations? Weapons platforms? Jake shrugged. I have heard there are some, but I have never seen them. I am not important enough to get briefed on that stuff. The general made a frustrated growling sound. He pulled up more images, showing massive Velcrin warships destroying cities on other planets. Buildings crumbled. Fires raged. People ran screaming. It was horrible to watch. This is what happens to species that resist us, Jothic said. 47 worlds have fallen to the Velcrin Empire. Your Earth will be next. You cannot stop us. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, pushing aside some of the fear. If you are so sure you will win, why do you need to interrogate me? The general's hand shot out and grabbed Jake by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Jake gasped for air, his feet kicking uselessly. Those yellow eyes stared into his face from inches away. Do not test me, human. I am giving you a chance to save your species. Answer my questions and perhaps Earth will be allowed to surrender peacefully. Refuse and billions will die. He dropped Jake, who fell to the floor coughing and gasping. The general left the cell and the force field snapped back into place. Jake lay on the cold floor for several minutes, catching his breath. His throat hurt where the general had grabbed him, but something about the encounter made him think. The general was scared, not of Jake personally, but of something. Why else would he be so desperate for information? The Velcrin had conquered 47 worlds, but they were worried about Earth. That meant humanity had a chance. The next day, or what Jake assumed was the next day, the general returned. This time he tried a different approach. He had food brought in, alien food that looked strange but smelled decent. Jake was hungry enough to try it. It tasted like mushrooms mixed with chicken. You see, Jothic said, sitting on the bench like they were having a friendly conversation, I am not cruel. I simply need information. Help me and you will be treated well. Jake ate slowly, thinking about his response. Can I ask you something? What? Why did you pick me? You could have taken the captain or the chief scientist. They know more than I do. The general smiled, showing those sharp teeth. Officers are taught to resist interrogation. They are trained to lie, to withhold information. But workers like you are honest. You tell the truth because you have no reason to lie. You know practical things, real things, not propaganda. Jake almost laughed. The general had it backwards. Officers might be trained to resist, but they also followed rules. Workers like Jake had learned to be creative, to improvise, to find solutions to problems that no one had thought about. That made them dangerous in ways the general did not understand. But Jake kept that thought to himself. Instead, he said, I understand. But I really do not know military secrets. I can tell you about the science vessel if that helps. I know everything about how it works. Jothic leaned forward. Yes, tell me. How do human ships operate? So Jake started talking. He explained the coolant systems, the power distribution, the life support. He made it technical and boring, using lots of engineering terms. The general listened carefully, sometimes asking questions. Jake answered honestly about the ship because none of it was secret information. But while he talked, Jake was watching. He was observing the general's armor, looking for weak points. He was listening to the sounds of the ship, learning its rhythms. He was studying the force field, trying to understand how it worked. He was doing what engineers do best, figuring out how things work so they can be fixed or broken. After several hours of questioning, the general seemed satisfied. You have been cooperative, human. This is good. Perhaps you are smarter than you look. Can I ask something else? Jake said, What? My crew. Did you keep your promise? Are they safe? They are in stasis pods on your vessel. They will not be harmed as long as you continue to cooperate. The general stood up. I will return tomorrow. Think about what other useful information you can provide. After he left, Jake sat in the cell and thought hard. The general believed he was winning. He thought Jake was just a simple worker who would break easily under pressure. That was good. Let him think that. People always underestimated the guy who fixed things. They did not realize that to fix something, you had to understand it completely, and what you understand you can also break. Jake started paying closer attention to everything around him. The force field hummed at a specific frequency. The lights in the corridor dimmed and brightened in a pattern, probably tied to the ship's power cycles. The ventilation system made a clicking sound every few minutes. The metal walls conducted sound differently than human ship walls. On the third day, the general brought Jake out of the cell. They walked through the corridors of the flagship, with armed guards surrounding them. Jathik wanted to show off his ship, to demonstrate Velcron superiority. Jake looked at everything with an engineer's eye. He saw power conduits running along the ceiling. He saw coolant pipes that were probably running too hot based on the heat shimmer around them. He saw a vibration in the deck plates that suggested the drive system was not properly balanced. He saw problems everywhere, but he said nothing. "Impressive, is it not?" the general said. "This ship could destroy your entire science fleet without taking damage." "It is very big," Jake agreed. Then, as if the thought just occurred to him, he added, "Though I notice some of your systems are running a bit hot. The coolant distribution seems inefficient." One of the Velcron officers nearby made an annoyed sound. "The human knows nothing. Our systems are functioning perfectly." But Jake saw the general's eyes narrow thoughtfully. He had planted a seed of doubt. They returned to the cell. As the force field activated behind him, Jake allowed himself a small smile. The general thought he was gathering information from Jake. But really, Jake was gathering information from them. And soon he would figure out how to use it. He just had to be patient. And patient was something engineers knew how to be. A week passed aboard the Velcron flagship. Jake had settled into a routine of sorts. Every day, General Jathik would question him about Earth and human technology. Jake would answer truthfully about things that did not matter while claiming ignorance about things that did. And all the while he watched and learned. The general was growing frustrated. He had expected Jake to break by now, to give up important secrets. But Jake had no important secrets to give. He really was just an engineer. However, he noticed that the general was starting to trust him, at least a little. That was exactly what Jake wanted. On the 8th day, something changed. Jake woke up to the sound of alarms blaring through the ship. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside his cell. He heard Velcron soldiers running past, shouting in their harsh language. Something was wrong with the ship. The force field to his cell flickered and nearly failed before stabilizing. That was interesting. Whatever was happening, it was affecting the power systems. Jake pressed his face against the force field, trying to see what was going on. An hour later, General Jathik appeared. He looked angry, his reptilian face darker than usual. He deactivated the force field and gestured for Jake to follow him. "Come, human. You will make yourself useful." They walked through the corridors to the engineering section of the ship. The room was massive, filled with alien machinery that pulsed with purple light. Several Velcron engineers were working frantically at control panels. Sparks were flying from one of the main power conduits. "Our primary coolant system has malfunctioned," the general said. 3 of my engineers have been injured trying to fix it." "You claim to know about coolant systems. Prove it." Jake looked at the damaged conduit. It was leaking some kind of glowing blue fluid that hissed when it hit the floor. The Velcron engineers were trying to seal it, but they were making it worse. They were using the wrong approach. "I need to understand your system first," Jake said. "Let me look at your technical specifications." The general barked an order in his language. One of the engineers pulled up holographic schematics. Jake studied them carefully. The Velcron coolant system was actually simpler than human designs, but it used different principles. It relied on pressure differentials rather than pumps. That meant the leak was probably caused by a pressure imbalance somewhere else in the system. "Stop trying to seal the leak," Jake said. "You need to balance the pressure first. The leak is just a symptom." The Velcron engineers looked at him with suspicion. One of them said something angry in their language. The general translated. "He says you know nothing about Velcron technology. You will make it worse." Jake shrugged. "Okay, let him keep trying his way. But in about 10 minutes that conduit is going to rupture completely, and you will lose power to half the ship. Your choice." The general stared at Jake for a long moment. Then he made a decision. "Show me what you would do." Jake approached the control panel. The interface was alien, but the principles were universal. Pressure, temperature, flow rate. These were things that worked the same way everywhere. He found the controls he needed and started making adjustments. "There is a blockage in the secondary line," Jake said, pointing to the schematic. "See how the pressure is building up here? That is pushing too much coolant through the primary line, which is causing the leak. We need to clear the blockage or reroute the flow." He made several more adjustments. The hissing from the leak began to quiet. The blue fluid stopped spraying everywhere. The pressure readings on the display started to normalize. The Velcron engineers watched in surprise. "There," Jake said. "The immediate problem is fixed. But you have a bigger issue. Your coolant system is running about 15% hotter than it should. That is why you keep having these problems. Someone designed this system for a cooler operating environment." One of the Velcron engineers checked the readings and made a surprised sound. He spoke rapidly to the general. Jarthik looked at Jake with new respect. "You are correct," the general said. "This ship was built for operations in deep space. But we have been operating closer to stars lately, and the systems have been overheating. Our engineers have been trying to compensate, but nothing has worked." "I could fix it," Jake said carefully. "But I would need to study your systems more. Make some modifications." The general considered this. Jake could see the thoughts moving behind those yellow eyes. The Velcron needed this ship functioning properly if they were going to attack human space. And Jake had just proven he could help. "You will work with my engineers," Jarthik decided. "You will fix our coolant problems. In return, I will give you better accommodations and food. Do this well, and I may even release you when we are finished with Earth." Jake nodded, hiding his excitement. This was exactly what he needed. Access to the ship's systems, the chance to move around freely, the opportunity to really learn how everything worked. Over the next few days, Jake was given limited access to various parts of the ship. Always with guards, always monitored, but still it was freedom compared to the cell. He worked with the Velcron engineers, who were grudgingly impressed with his skills. He fixed the coolant system properly, redesigning parts of it to handle the higher temperatures. But while he fixed things, he also learned. He learned that the ship's power distribution system had a single point of failure in the main relay. He learned that the communications array was vulnerable to feedback if overloaded. He learned that the gravity generators operated on a frequency that could interfere with the navigation sensors if disrupted. He learned where every critical system was located and how they all connected. And he planted seeds. Nothing obvious. Just small inefficiencies in his repairs. A power relay that would work fine but run slightly hot. A coolant junction that would handle normal loads but might fail under stress. A connection that was solid but not quite as solid as it should be. Things that would not be noticed now but could cause problems later at exactly the wrong moment. The Velcron engineers thought Jake was helping them. The general thought Jake was being cooperative, but Jake was preparing for war. Meanwhile, the flagship continued moving deeper into human space. Jake overheard conversations between Velcron officers. They were scouting, looking for weaknesses in human defenses. The general was planning a major attack. He wanted to strike at Earth itself, to crush humanity in one decisive blow. Jake kept his face neutral when he heard these plans, but inside he was calculating. Time was running out. He needed to do more damage to the ship, but he also needed to survive long enough to warn Earth. It was a difficult balance. On the 15th day of his captivity, Jake was working on a power distribution panel when he overheard something important. Two Velcron officers were talking nearby. Not realizing Jake understood more of their language than he had let on. He had been listening carefully for weeks, picking up words and phrases. "The fleet will rendezvous with us in 3 days," one officer said. "Then we attack the human homeworld." "The general is confident," the other replied. "He says humans are weak and divided. They will fall quickly. 3 days. That was not much time. Jake needed to act soon, but he had to be smart about it. If he tried to escape now and failed, the general would lock him back in the cell or worse. He needed to wait for the right moment. That night, as he lay on the more comfortable bed in his new quarters, Jake thought about home. He thought about Earth, about Colorado, about the mountains he used to hike. He thought about his crew, frozen in stasis, trusting him to keep them safe. He thought about all the people on Earth who had no idea an alien fleet was coming to destroy them. He had always been good at fixing things. Now he needed to be good at breaking things, and he needed to be very, very careful about it. The next morning, General Jarthik summoned him. The general seemed pleased, almost happy. "That was a bad sign, human Jake," the general said. "You have been very helpful. My engineers tell me the ship is operating better than it has in months. I am impressed. Thank you, Jake said carefully. I have decided to reward your cooperation. You may send a message to your crew. Let them know you are being treated well. It will comfort them when they wake. Jake's heart skipped. A message. That meant access to communications. That was an opportunity, maybe the only one he would get. That is very kind, Jake said, keeping his voice humble. I would like that very much. The general smiled his sharp-toothed smile. Good, you see? Cooperation benefits everyone. Come. We will go to the communications center now. As Jake followed the general through the corridors, his mind was racing. He would only get one chance at this. He needed to make it count. The message could not be obvious or the Velcron would detect it, but it had to be clear enough that someone on Earth would understand. He thought about his training, about the emergency protocols all space crews learned. There were code words and phrases for situations like this. He just had to remember them and use them naturally. When they reached the communications center, Jake sat down at the terminal. A Velcron officer stood beside him, monitoring everything he typed. The general watched from across the room. Jake took a breath and started typing. His message to the crew of the Horizon's Edge would be simple and innocent. But hidden in the words would be a warning that would hopefully reach Earth in time. His hands moved over the alien keyboard. Jake typed his message carefully, aware of the Velcron officer reading over his shoulder. Every word had to sound normal while carrying hidden meaning. To the crew of Horizon's Edge, this is Jake Morrison. I am being treated well aboard the alien vessel. The general has been fair. I am helping with repairs and maintenance. The situation is stable. Do not worry about me. Looking forward to seeing home soon. Remember the 3 rules we learned in basic training. Stay safe. Jake. The Velcron officer read the message and nodded. Acceptable. Transmit it. Jake pressed send and watched the message disappear into space. The general seemed satisfied. He had no idea that Jake had just sent a warning. The 3 rules of basic training was a code phrase. It meant hostile contact, prepare for attack, send military response. Anyone with space training would recognize it immediately. Now Jake just had to stay alive long enough for help to arrive. 2 days passed. The Velcron flagship moved closer to human territory. Jake continued working on the ship's systems, making repairs that looked perfect but were actually ticking time bombs. He adjusted flow regulators so they would overload under battle stress. He weakened structural connections in critical areas. He programmed subtle errors into navigation systems that would not show up until the worst possible moment. The Velcron engineers praised his work. The general trusted him more each day. Jake hated lying to them like this, but he had no choice. It was them or humanity. It was his crew or the Velcron Empire. On the 3rd day, the rest of the Velcron fleet arrived. Jake watched through a viewport as dozens of massive warships appeared in formation around the flagship. Each one was armed with enough weapons to destroy a city. Together, they could probably destroy a planet. General Jathick was in high spirits. He brought Jake to the command center to watch the fleet assemble. Look, human. Look at the power of the Velcron Empire. Your species never had a chance. Jake said nothing. He was counting ships, noting their positions, memorizing everything he could. If he survived this, the information would be valuable. In 6 hours, we jumped to Earth's system, the general continued. Your homeworld will have one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will demonstrate our power by destroying one of your cities. After that, they will beg for mercy. You really think it will be that easy? Jake asked. The general laughed. You doubt it? Human, we have destroyed civilizations far older and stronger than yours. Some had technology you cannot imagine. All of them fell. You are primitives who barely understand space travel. You will be the easiest conquest yet. Jake wanted to argue to defend humanity, but he stayed quiet. Let the general be confident. Let him underestimate humans. That had always been humanity's secret weapon. Everyone underestimated them until it was too late. 4 hours before the yow. Jump, Jake was working in the engine room when alarms started blaring. Not the red emergency alarms this time, but yellow warning alerts. Something had triggered the fleet's sensors. Jake kept working, but he listened carefully to the Velcron crew around him. They were confused and alarmed. Ships had appeared on their sensors. Human ships, but not where they expected, not defending Earth in a predictable formation. Instead, they were scattered across multiple locations, moving in strange patterns. General Jothik's voice came over the ship's communication system. All crew to battle stations. We have encountered human forces. They are attempting some kind of primitive ambush. All ships prepare to engage. Jake's heart started racing. The message had gotten through. Earth had responded. But what kind of response could possibly work against this massive fleet? He was ordered back to his quarters. Guards locked him inside and took positions outside his door. Through the walls, Jake could hear the ship coming alive with activity. Weapons charging, engines powering up, crew rushing to combat positions. Then the battle began. The first explosion shook the entire flagship. Jake was thrown against the wall. The lights flickered and turned red. More explosions followed, one after another. The ship was taking heavy fire. But that should not be possible. Human weapons should not be able to penetrate Velcron shields that easily. Unless something was wrong with the shields. Unless someone had weakened them from the inside. Jake smiled grimly. His sabotage was working. Through his door, he heard Velcron soldiers shouting in panic. Something was very wrong out there. The attacks were coming from unexpected directions. The human ships were not fighting like any military force the Velcron had encountered before. The ship shook again, harder this time. Jake heard the scream of metal tearing. That was a hull breach somewhere. He grabbed onto the bed frame to steady himself. The gravity fluctuated, making his stomach lurch. Another system he had subtly damaged. His door suddenly opened. A Velcron soldier stood there, weapon raised. But the soldier was not looking at Jake. He was looking at something down the corridor with fear in his eyes. Then he ran away, leaving the door open. This was Jake's chance. Maybe his only chance. He had to move now. He ran out of his quarters and into chaos. The corridors were full of smoke and sparks. Sections of the ceiling had collapsed. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. Velcron soldiers ran past him, ignoring him completely. They had bigger problems than one human prisoner. Jake headed toward the escape pod bay. He had memorized the route weeks ago, just in case, but the ship was damaged badly, and several corridors were blocked by debris. He had to take alternate routes, climbing through maintenance tunnels and crawling under collapsed support beams. He reached a junction and stopped. General Jothik was there, directing soldiers. The general saw Jake and their eyes met. For a moment, neither moved. Then understanding dawned on Jothik's face. "You," the general snarled. "This is your doing. You sabotage my ship." Jake backed away slowly. "I fixed your ship. I just fixed it in a way that would fail when you needed it most. You are a maintenance worker. A nobody. How could you do this?" "That is your mistake," Jake said. "You thought being ordinary made me harmless. But every human is dangerous when they need to be. We are survivors. We adapt. We fight with whatever we have." The general drew a weapon, a long blade that crackled with energy. "You have killed us both, human. This ship is dying. But I will have the satisfaction of killing you first." Another explosion rocked the ship. The general stumbled. Jake did not hesitate. He ran. Behind him, he heard the general shouting orders, heard soldiers pursuing him. But the ship was falling apart, and the Velcron had more important things to worry about than one escaping prisoner. Jake reached the escape pod bay. Several pods were already gone, taken by fleeing Velcron crew. He climbed into the nearest pod and slammed his fist on the launch button. The pod ejected with a violent thrust that pressed him into the seat. Through the pod's small viewport, Jake could see the battle raging outside, and what he saw amazed him. The human fleet was not just military vessels. There were cargo ships with hastily mounted weapons, mining ships using their ore-processing lasers as weapons. Even civilian transports were out there, providing electronic warfare support. Humanity had mobilized everything, every ship that could fly, every weapon that could fire, every person who could help. They were not fighting like a trained military. They were fighting like a species that refused to die. The Velcran fleet was in disarray. Their ships were malfunctioning from Jake's sabotage. Their tactics were useless against the chaotic human assault. One by one, Velcran ships were retreating or being destroyed. Jake's pod drifted away from the dying flagship. He watched as more explosions tore through the massive vessel. Systems he had weakened were failing in cascade, exactly as he had planned. The ship was eating itself alive. Then something locked onto his pod. A tractor beam. Jake tensed, afraid it was the Velcron recapturing him. But when he looked at the source, he saw a human ship. A small patrol craft with Earth military markings. The ship pulled his pod into its bay. When the pod door opened, Jake stumbled out into the arms of human soldiers. He had never been so happy to see another person in his life. "Jake Morrison?" one soldier asked. "Yes, that is me." "You are the engineer from the Horizon's Edge? The one who sent the warning?" "Yes." The soldier smiled and clapped him on the shoulder. "Son, you just saved the world. That message gave us time to mobilize. And whatever you did to that flagship, it turned the whole battle. The alien fleet is retreating." Jake looked back through the bay doors at the battlefield. It was true. The Velcran ships were jumping away, fleeing the system. The massive flagship was a dead hulk, drifting in space. Humanity had won. "What about my crew?" Jake asked urgently. "The Horizon's Edge. Are they safe?" "We recovered them 2 days ago. They are fine. A bit confused, but fine." Jake felt relief wash over him. They were safe. Everyone was safe. He had done it. He had survived. More than that, he had fought back in the only way he knew how. By fixing things in a way that broke them at the right moment. "We need to debrief you," the soldier said. "Everything you learned about the aliens, their technology, their tactics, it is all valuable intelligence." "I will tell you everything," Jake promised. "But first, can I ask for something?" "What?" "Coffee. Real coffee. I have not had decent coffee in 3 weeks." The soldier laughed. "I think we can arrange that." As the patrol craft turned toward home, Jake looked one last time at the wreckage of the journey back to Earth took 3 days. Jake spent most of that time in debriefing sessions with military intelligence officers. He told them everything he had learned about the Velcron Empire. Their ship designs, their weapons, their tactics, their weaknesses. He drew diagrams of the flagship's layout from memory. He explained how their technology worked and where it was vulnerable. The intelligence officers were amazed by how much information he had gathered. They kept asking how he had managed to learn so much while being a prisoner. Jake explained that it was simple. He had just done what engineers always do: watch, listen, and figure out how things work. When he finally arrived on Earth, Jake was exhausted. The patrol craft landed at a military base in Nevada. He walked down the ramp into bright sunlight and breathed real Earth air for the first time in months. It smelled like dust and sage and home. A crowd was waiting for him. Military officers, government officials, and reporters. Cameras flashed. People shouted questions. Jake felt overwhelmed. He had never liked being the center of attention. He just wanted to go home and sleep in his own bed. A tall woman in a military uniform pushed through the crowd. She had short gray hair and carried herself with authority. When she reached Jake, she saluted him. Jake did not know what to do, so he saluted back awkwardly. "Mr. Morrison, I am General Patricia Hayes, head of Earth Defense Command. On behalf of humanity, thank you for your service. Your actions saved billions of lives." "I just did what I had to do," Jake said uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "That is where you are wrong," the general said. "Most people would have broken under that pressure. You stayed calm. You observed. You planned. And you executed perfectly. That takes a special kind of courage." The reporters shouted more questions. General Hayes held up her hand for silence. "Mr. Morrison needs rest. There will be time for questions later. Right now, we have some people who want to see him." She led Jake through the crowd to a waiting area. Standing there was the entire crew of the Horizon's Edge. When they saw Jake, they rushed forward. Captain Lisa Martin hugged him so hard he could barely breathe. Danny Fletcher, the cook, was crying. The others crowded around, patting his back and thanking him. "We thought you were dead," Lisa said, wiping her eyes. "When we woke up from stasis and they told us what happened, what you did, we could not believe it. You saved us. You saved everyone." Jake felt his own eyes getting wet. "I just kept my promise. I said I would not let them hurt you." They talked for an hour, sharing stories and crying and laughing. The crew told him what had happened after he was taken, how the Velcron had kept their word and put everyone in stasis, how human forces had found the horizon's edge drifting in space and recovered them, how they had waited anxiously for news about Jake. Finally, General Hayes returned. "Mr. Morrison, the president wants to meet you. There is also going to be a medal ceremony. The government wants to recognize your heroism." "A medal?" Jake said. "I do not need a medal. I was just doing my job." "Your job was maintaining ships," the general said with a smile. "What you did was far beyond that. You became a spy, a saboteur, and a hero. Whether you want the recognition or not, humanity needs to honor you. You represent the best of what we can be." The next week was a blur. Jake met the president and received the Star of Valor, the highest civilian honor Earth could give. He appeared on news programs across the planet. People called him a hero everywhere he went. Children dressed up as him for Halloween. Someone even made an action figure of him, which he found ridiculous. Through it all, Jake remained humble. He insisted that he was not special, just lucky. But people did not believe him. They saw what he represented, that any human, no matter how ordinary they seemed, could make a difference when it mattered. The military studied everything Jake had learned about the Velcron. Engineers analyzed his descriptions of their technology. Strategists studied their tactics. Scientists worked on developing countermeasures. Jake spent hours consulting with them, answering endless questions. 6 months after the battle, a delegation arrived from the Velcron Empire. They requested a meeting with Earth's government. General Hayes asked Jake if he wanted to attend. He said yes. He wanted to see what would happen. The meeting took place in Geneva at the United Nations building. Jake sat in the back of the conference room with Lisa and other members of his crew. At the front of the room, the Velcron delegation entered. They wore formal robes instead of armor, but Jake recognized their reptilian features immediately. The lead delegate approached the podium. "I am Ambassador Krell of the Velcron Empire. I come with a message from our High Council. The Velcron Empire wishes to establish peaceful relations with humanity. We acknowledge that our previous actions were wrong. We seek forgiveness and friendship." There was murmuring in the room. The human delegates looked skeptical. The Velcron had tried to conquer Earth. They had attacked without provocation. Why should humanity trust them now? Ambassador Krell continued. "We underestimated your species. We believed you were weak because you were new to space. We believed your lack of a unified military made you vulnerable. We were wrong about everything. The battle taught us that humanity possesses something we do not. You have creativity, adaptability, the ability to turn anything into a weapon when survival demands it. These qualities make you dangerous in ways we never anticipated." He paused and looked directly at Jake. "There is one among you who taught us this lesson personally. We know he is here. We wish to speak with him." Everyone turned to look at Jake. He felt his face get hot. General Hayes gestured for him to come forward. Reluctantly, Jake stood and walked to the front of the room. He stood facing the Velcron ambassador. Ambassador Krell bowed his head. "Jake Morrison, you defeated General Jothik, one of our greatest warriors, not with weapons but with intelligence and patience. You turned his own ship against him. You showed us that humans cannot be judged by appearances, that even your most ordinary citizens are capable of extraordinary things." "Is the general alive?" Jake asked. "Yes, he survived the battle, but he has been stripped of his rank and position. He sits in disgrace on our homeworld, a warning to others about the price of arrogance." Jake felt a strange mix of emotions. He did not hate the general. Jothik had been doing what he thought was right for his people. But he had been wrong, and he had paid for that mistake. "What happens now?" Jake asked. "Now we learn from our mistakes," the ambassador said. "The Velcron Empire will leave human space. We will establish trade agreements and cultural exchanges if you are willing. But we will never again threaten your species. This is our promise." The negotiations continued for days. Eventually, a treaty was signed. The Velcron agreed to pay reparations for their attack. They shared technology and knowledge with humanity. In return, Earth agreed not to pursue military action against the Velcron Empire. It was not a perfect peace, but it was a start. Jake watched it all with satisfaction. Violence had been avoided. Two species that had been enemies were now working toward friendship. All because he had refused to give up when things looked hopeless. A year after the incident, Jake returned to work. He could have had any job he wanted. The government offered him positions in military intelligence or defense research. Private companies offered him enormous salaries, but Jake turned them all down. He went back to what he loved. He took a job as a maintenance engineer on a new science vessel called the Discovery. On his first day back, the ship's captain approached him nervously. "Mr. Morrison, are you sure you want to be here?" "After everything that happened, I would understand if you wanted something safer." Jake smiled. "Captain, this is what I do. I fix things, and someone needs to keep this ship running. But what if something happens again? What if we encounter more hostile aliens? Then I will deal with it," Jake said simply. "Just like before, by watching, learning, and figuring out how to solve the problem. That is what humans do best." The captain nodded, still looking uncertain. But as Jake walked through the corridors of the Discovery, checking systems and making notes, he felt at peace. This was where he belonged. Not in meetings with politicians or giving speeches about heroism. Just doing his job, keeping things running, ready to adapt if challenges came. Because that was the truth about humanity that the Velcron had learned the hard way. Humans did not need to be soldiers to be dangerous. They did not need fancy titles or special training. Every human carried the seeds of survival in their hearts. The ability to look at any situation and find a way through it. The stubbornness to keep going when things looked impossible. The creativity to turn anything into a tool or a weapon if necessary. Jake Morrison was not special. He was just ordinary. But being ordinary, he had discovered, was the most extraordinary thing a human could be. Because ordinary humans had built civilizations, explored the stars, survived extinctions, and would probably survive whatever the universe threw at them next. He reached the engine room and started his first inspection. The coolant system needed adjustment. The power distribution could be optimized. The gravity generators had a slight wobble. Just normal maintenance work. The kind of work that kept ships running and crews safe. Jake smiled to himself as he got to work. General Jothic had called him a nobody. 5 years had passed since the incident with the Velcron Empire. Jake Morrison was 37 now, still working as an engineer on the Discovery. The ship had traveled to dozens of star systems, conducting research and making peaceful contact with new species. Life had returned to normal, or as normal as it could be when everyone in the galaxy knew your name. Jake was checking a power relay in the engine room when Captain Lisa Martin found him. Yes, the same Lisa who had been captain of the Horizon's Edge. After the incident, she had been promoted and given command of the Discovery. She had insisted that Jake be part of her crew. They had been through too much together to work apart. "Jake, we have a situation," Lisa said. Her face was serious. "We have received a distress call. It is from a Velcron vessel." Jake set down his tools and wiped his hands. "A Velcron ship? Are you sure?" "Positive. They are stranded about 6 light years from here. Engine failure. They are requesting assistance from any nearby vessels." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. The Velcron. He had not dealt with them directly since the treaty was signed. Earth and the Velcron Empire had maintained polite but distant relations. Trade happened through intermediaries. Diplomatic contact was minimal. Both sides were still learning to trust each other. "What do you want to do?" Lisa asked. "Technically, we are obligated under interstellar law to respond to distress calls. But given our history with them, I wanted to check with you first." Jake thought about it. The easy answer was to ignore the call, let someone else help them. But that was not who he was. That was not who humanity was. They helped people in trouble. Even former enemies. We should help them, Jake said. "It is the right thing to do," Lisa nodded. "I was hoping you would say that. Setting course now. We should reach them in about 8 hours." The Discovery changed course and headed toward the Velcron vessel. Jake could not concentrate on his work. His mind kept going back to his time as a prisoner. The cold cell, General Jothic's yellow eyes, the constant fear. But he also remembered that not all the Velcron had been cruel. Some of the engineers had been professional, even friendly. They were just people doing their jobs like him. 8 hours later, the Discovery dropped out of faster-than-light travel near the stranded Velcron ship. It was smaller than the flagship Jake remembered, probably a cargo or transport vessel. Its engines were dark and it was drifting slowly in space. Lisa opened a communication channel. Velcron vessel. This is Captain Lisa Martin of the Earthship Discovery. We received your distress call. What is your situation? A Velcron face appeared on the screen. It was a female, Jake thought. Based on the smaller horns and different facial structure, she looked relieved to see them. Captain Martin, thank you for responding. I am Captain Vrel. Our main drive has suffered a catastrophic failure. We have been stranded for 2 days. Life support is failing. We have 32 crew members aboard. We will help, Lisa said. I am sending over an engineering team to assess the damage. Stand by. She turned to Jake. I know this is asking a lot, but you are the best engineer we have. Will you go? Jake took a deep breath. Going aboard a Velcron ship again. The idea made his skin crawl. But people were in danger. He could not let his personal feelings stop him from helping. I will go, he said. 20 minutes later, Jake was in a shuttle heading toward the Velcron vessel. He was accompanied by 2 other engineers from the Discovery and 4 security officers just in case. As they docked with the Velcron ship, Jake felt his heart racing. The airlock opened with a hiss that brought back bad memories. But the scene inside was different from what he expected. The Velcron crew looked scared and desperate. They were not warriors in armor. They were civilians in simple jumpsuits, families. There were even children, smaller versions of the adults with tiny horns and wide eyes. Captain Vrel met them at the airlock. When she saw Jake, her eyes widened in recognition. You are Jake Morrison, the engineer who defeated General Jothik. I am just an engineer, Jake said. Here to fix your drive system. Can you show me the damage? Vrel led them through the ship. It was cramped and cold. The emergency lighting cast everything in a dim blue glow. Velcron crew members watched the humans pass with a mixture of fear and hope. Jake noticed that many of them kept their distance, especially from him. The engine room was a disaster. One of the main drive cores had exploded, taking out half the power systems with it. The backup generators were running, but they were failing too. Jake could see why. The damage had been caused by improper maintenance. Someone had cut corners and now everyone was paying the price. How bad is it? Vrel asked. Jake examined the damage carefully. Bad but fixable. It will take about 12 hours of work. We will need parts from our ship. We do not have 12 hours, Vrel said quietly. Life support will fail in 6 hours. Maybe 7 if we are lucky, Jake thought fast. We can evacuate your crew to the Discovery while we make repairs. Once the drive is fixed, you can return to your ship. Vrel looked uncomfortable. Captain Martin would allow this? Taking Velcron civilians aboard her ship? She will, Jake said with confidence. That is what humans do. We help people in trouble no matter who they are. The evacuation took 2 hours. The Velcron crew was nervous about boarding a human vessel, but they had no choice. The Discovery opened its cargo bays and set up temporary living quarters. Lisa personally greeted each Velcron as they came aboard, assuring them they were safe. Jake stayed behind with his engineering team and a small group of Velcron engineers. Together, they worked to repair the damaged drive system. At first, the Velcron were suspicious and distant. But as they worked side by side with the humans, that began to change. One of the Velcron engineers, a young male named Tresh, watched Jake work with fascination. The stories about you are true. You really do understand our technology. I had a lot of time to study it, Jake said dryly, not mentioning that he had been a prisoner at the time. May I ask you something? Tresh said hesitantly. Go ahead. Why are you helping us? After what we did to your people, why would you come here and risk your life to save us? Jake paused in his work and looked at Tresh. The young Velcron looked genuinely confused. Jake realized that this was important. This was a chance to teach a lesson, the same way he had taught General Jothik a lesson, but a different kind. Because you need help, Jake said, and because your people are not defined by one general's mistakes. You are individuals. These families on this ship, they did not attack Earth. They are just trying to live their lives. Why would I punish them for something they did not do? Tresh thought about this. That is very different from how the Velcron Empire used to think. We judged entire species by their worst examples. We treated everyone as enemies until they proved otherwise. That is a lonely way to live, Jake said. Humans learned a long time ago that you have to give people a chance. Sometimes they disappoint you, but sometimes they surprise you in good ways. They continued working. The other Velcron engineers listened to the conversation, and Jake could see them thinking about his words. He realized that this repair job was about more than just fixing an engine. It was about building bridges between species. 6 hours into the repair, they hit a problem. One of the power couplings was completely destroyed, and they did not have a replacement. Without it, the drive would not function. Jake stared at the damaged component, his mind racing through possibilities. "We have failed," one of the Velcron engineers said sadly. "Without that coupling, the drive cannot be repaired." "Wait," Jake said. "The coupling from the Discovery's backup generator. It is not an exact match, but I could modify it to work." "You would take a part from your own ship?" Tresh asked in surprise. "If it saves your crew, yes." Jake called the Discovery and explained the situation. Lisa did not hesitate. "Take whatever you need. I trust your judgment." The modified coupling worked. Barely. It was not elegant, and it would need to be replaced properly at a Velcron station, but it would hold long enough to get the ship to safety. 12 hours after they started, the drive came back online. The Velcron ship had power again. Life support stabilized. The Velcron crew returned to their ship. There were tears and thanks. Parents hugged their children. Captain Vrel approached Jake as he was preparing to return to the Discovery. "Jake Morrison, I do not know how to thank you. You saved our lives, all of us. After what our empire did to you, you had every right to refuse. But you came anyway. You risked your own ship to save ours. This is something I will never forget." "Just help someone else when they need it," Jake said. "That is thanks enough." Vrel hesitated, then said, "There is something you should know. General Zathik, the one who captured you, he is no longer in disgrace." Jake felt surprise. "What do you mean?" "After the battle, he was shamed, as you know. But in the years since, he has changed. He wrote a book about his experience, about how he underestimated humanity and what it taught him. It has become required reading in our military academies. He teaches young officers not to make the same mistakes he did. He has become one of the greatest advocates for peace with your species." Jake did not know what to say. The general who had been his captor was now teaching peace. It was strange to think about. "He talks about you often," Vrel continued. "He says you were the teacher.